so happy that you're with us. And I have two very special guests today, two wonderfully mustachioed men, Jake and McLean Westbrook brothers. And they are the voices you know so well behind Yesterday Today. And they are kind of purveyors of vintage culture to the masses. And we are very excited. Jake has been releasing a lot of great things on YouTube recently, and he's kind of known around there as the king of the vintage videos. And you should just check out some of the comments sometime. People are so happy he's been posting new videos there. And McLean is kind of working his way out of the audio world into the visual world, and he's beginning a career in television and I think especially sports, if I'm not misspeaking. But television, news, that world, and broadcast journalism. So we're really excited to have you guys here. Welcome to the show.
Nice to be here.
Thank you.
But you guys are very creative. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you guys about is what sources do you draw upon for inspiration for your creativity?
For me, I feel like there's a lot of kind of different things that I could point to. A lot of that's kind of influenced me not only like creatively in hobbies, but also in a career, as you kind of hinted at as well. But I think some of my earliest like memories in terms of like inspiration or pieces of media that I found like really, really cool or want to kind of recreate is way back in childhood. I don't remember exactly, but what the format was. But we would when we were all kids, me and my brothers would listen to a lot of like old time radio. So we'd have the Jack Benny and stuff, and I think a lot of it, because old time radio, Jake can tell you more about history, but a lot of the sort of cataloging of has been interesting because you'd find like MP3 discs. I remember it was a big deal when we ordered a bunch of like CDs that had all these MP3 files on them.
McLean's so young, his earliest memory is MP3. When I was...
all right.
Hey,
I was about to say, you can also...
We were getting the cassette tapes from the local library,
from the library, you know? I have some... I'm not a whippersnapper, okay?
Yeah, the cassette tapes are definitely... I remember listening to old-time radio show, like my cousins, when we'd go to their house, they'd have these cassette tapes and we'd listen to, and it was so funny because a lot of these shows were cliffhangers, and you would listen to the episode, but that would be it on the tape, and you'd be like, well, what happened, you know? And you never find out what happened after that. So
yeah, a lot of shows you don't have every single episode. So one of my favorite shows that I listened to like basically the entirety of was The Great Gildersleeve, because it had a lot of overarching plot lines. And so you'd just be like, oh, this character doesn't exist anymore, and I don't have an explanation why, because like 3 episodes are missing or something like that.
Yeah, so it's so funny. That reminds me. So like when if we're talking creativity, my earliest memory of like making things. Not to be too self-indulgent, but back in the day, when we were real little kids, McLean, I will guarantee you McLean does not even remember this. When we lived in Brownsville, I would have been about, 7, 8. We used to record the radio show. It was really my introduction into radio shows, old-time radio, was Adventures in Odyssey. Now, any Christian kid worth his salt knows what Adventures in Odyssey is. And what we would do is we would get these tapes. My mom would buy this like big package of tapes from like a dollar store or something. We'd record every episode of Odyssey, and so we had hundreds and hundreds of these cassette tapes lying around the house. And Adventures in Odyssey was like a 25-minute long show with 5 minutes on the end of the tape. And tape absolutely fascinated me as a kid that you could record your voice and play it back. So what we would do is we would grab these Adventures in Odyssey tapes, fast forward to the end of the show, and on the last 5 minutes, I would record what we called Jake and McLean's talk show. As far as I can remember, it mostly consisted of us yelling. And if you can imagine like 2 7- and 4-year-old kids just... You can imagine how good that show was. My dad would listen to those tapes to help him sleep, just put radio shows on. It would get to the end of the show, and then it would just be. It drove him insane. He demanded that we stop, but we did not. And so that was the beginning of our creative journey.
Weren't always encouraged in these creative processes. But...
No, in fact, we were often discouraged.
Yeah.
We were
just kidding.
We used to write these little homemade like comic books all the time, and we would just be constantly using up our parents' printer paper and pens, and we were bleeding them dry.
That's the sacrifice we had to make for GIF comics.
Yeah, man, had to be done. Had to be done.
That's awesome. That is awesome. So I think maybe like one of like the main places that people could get that sort of thing was either like the library or like Cracker Barrel.
Cracker Barrel?
Yeah.
I'm not from the South. I don't know about this Cracker Barrel you speak of.
They have them out here west too. I've only been a couple times, but I don't know where this is going either.
Okay. So, but like, it's kind of like the old country stores. So there's like the rocking chairs out front, and they've got like all the old decorations. And they've
got a Hobby Lobby?
It's a restaurant, Jake. How do you know? You never heard of Cracker Barrel?
I've heard the name. I just said I didn't know it was like a
it's like a restaurant / old country store kind of thing.
Okay.
You'd probably like it, honestly.
Honestly, you would love it because I know in one of your lesser known podcasts, you did a whole series on Fizzology, and
yeah,
and they had a wall of like obscure pops, and I actually was looking at it, and as I was looking at this wall, I was thinking about like all of like the history behind like the different pops and stuff. So at any rate, if you're interested in like old timey things, I think you'd really like Cracker Barrel. But
yeah, I'll take it into consideration.
Yeah, it could really make you feel a sense of kinship, I think. So, but yeah, so when I was reading your book, Jake, A Case in Oakhaven, I really kind of thought that maybe you might have some P.G. Wodehouse in your background. Are you a fan of P.G. Wodehouse at all?
I am so happy because I've seen a couple of the Amazon reviews that said this sounds like P.G. Wodehouse, and I'm like, how did they know? I love P.G. Wodehouse. It's like it's one of those authors that's just obscure enough to where I'm always surprised when other people know about him, even though maybe I shouldn't be. But it makes me so happy when people mention his name around me. It's funny to me. But yeah. I love P.G. Wodehouse.
That's great. Yeah, and you did a really good job on the book. Honestly, I'm not trying to just say that because you're on the show, but it's really enjoyable, and I thought you did a great job of really the New England countryside. And now you guys have lived most of your life out west, but
yeah, I'm an aspirant New Englander. I wish I was a New Englander. I like the idea of New England. It really appeals to me. You know, it's where the country got started. You got the it's like perfect autumn scenes. Like it's just something about New England that viscerally appeals to me. But you know, it's just out of my reach because it's so far that way. You know, it's like it's an aspiration for me.
You always have to have a location that you want to live in, and then a location that you can romanticize about living in. That's what you need.
Yeah.
You have to have the yearning. The yearning is a big thing.
Yes, absolutely. So for you, Jake, that is New England, and in all of its New Englandness. So you really get a sense of that in the book and in some of the Yesterday Today podcasts. You know, like when you guys are going through on your road trip. Did you guys ever take a road trip out there?
Well, I have. McLean and I have taken several road trips. I went to New England once, kind of toured up and down the coast of Maine and Massachusetts by train, but we haven't been to New England ourselves. No.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'd say for the Yesterday Today like road trip story arc, that was probably mostly drawn off of. We took a road trip a couple summers ago, probably like 4 years ago at this point, like right after COVID. But we ended up going
3 years
down
ago, yeah.
into like Arizona, over to Texas, and then like up all the way into Montana, and then back to Idaho.
I'm a huge road trip fan.
If you can take a road trip,
picked up on that.
Highly recommend. If you can take a road trip, it's always a good idea. We went through like the Oklahoma Panhandle and saw like this tiny town that had like one like city hall building in like a roundabout, and there was like some guy, old farmer guy,
The
standing in
roundest
coveralls.
man I have ever seen,
Just an
leaning
old,
up against the
round
courthouse.
farmer. And that's
He
not
was a
not a
circle.
detriment,
He
not
was a
an
sphere.
insult. This is a salt of the earth type of person.
One of them corn-fed boys you hear about.
Exactly. Seeing rural America out there. We followed some of Route 66 from like
Route
Arizona
66,
through New
yes.
Mexico and Texas.
I've been along Route 66 a couple times, and no words can describe just how much hatred I have for the interstate highway system and what it has done to this country.
You're just shaking your fist at Dwight D. Eisenhower.
I am an old codger shaking my
Darn
fist
you, Department of Transportation.
at Dwight D. Eisenhower. Yes, I am. I don't want to go into it now because it's just going to devolve into swearing and just unbridled rage. I don't think you want that on this podcast.
Yeah, so the old highway system, it would actually like run through towns. You're driving by a lot slower. The interstates kind of like bypass so much stuff, and so there's like a lot of. If you take the interstate, it's an efficient way to travel, but I think you kind of miss out on a lot of things.
The interstate rests mainly, there's several factors, but mainly on the point that it is ugly. I am a highly aesthetic-minded person, and the interstate system is ugly.
You're going to find out that Jake has a lot of very specific takes. A lot of like very specific like old man type of takes. And in some of the writing for Yesterday Today, I've tried to base Jake's character off of some of his old man takes. So that kind of seeps through, I hope.
My old man takes have a common unifying theme, which is that modern society has bought into the lie that beauty is relative. Beauty is subjective.
Yeah, that's what they mostly boil down to.
That was crystallized there. You really boiled it down there to just one sentence. That was perfect.
I like to boil things.
Yeah,
just like they did in the old days.
Yeah.
Well, during COVID, my wife and I were trying to figure out, where we could go on vacation because we had the summer before we had gone to the cabin, and while we were there, the furnace went out, and there was all these workmen there early in the morning, working in the crawl space directly underneath where we were sleeping and blasting the radio. It was very unidyllic, and so we were like, okay, where can we go to find something? Well, I guess more aesthetic. So we had been watching a lot of Fixer Upper at the time, and we decided, well, hey, I bet Texas is open. Let's go down there. So we went down to the silos down there, and it was really amazing because we had never been to Texas before, and it was just cool getting to meet all of the people down there. And we stayed at Airbnb, so we kind of had a little bit more of that local feel. And they have like a obscure law down there that if you have like 3 chickens and like one other like livestock animal, you can consider your property a farm. So every place we stayed had goats and chickens and stuff, and it was just hilarious. Like everywhere you went, we were just like looking for the livestock. Well, where's your livestock?
Yeah, I think on our road trip, the one that Jake and I went on, so when you go on like a trip or vacation, you have multiple routes, you have multiple options in terms of how nice do you want it to be as opposed to how cheap you want it to be.
Yeah.
And we opted for more of the cheap, so we stayed in a lot of Motel 6s and ate a lot of fast food as opposed to like an Airbnb and eating local cuisine.
I maintain
so for all of Jake's takes,
that is the true spirit of the road trip, is cheap motels and fast food.
For all of Jake's takes about the interstate kind of obscuring local experiences, we didn't get a lot of that.
I will
So,
argue
in
against
other
that. I
words,
will say,
important, but hey, at sometimes you gotta be cheap. So,
on the subject of cheapness, when McLean and
I
I
have a
went to
communications degree. I'm not rolling in dough.
when McLean and I went to Alaska, we did use the Airbnb to find just this random cabin up near Fairbanks in the middle of nowhere.
Cabin
And
might be an overstatement. It was like one room.
that's what you want in a cabin, my opinion, in
course.
Alaska. But cars are expensive to rent, and the hack is you rent a U-Haul pickup truck, very cheap per day. And you just got to keep the mileage down on it, okay? So they don't charge you too much.
So you
we
can
were
get
driving-
around Fairbanks, but
Yeah,
you
we were
can't.
driving the U-Haul pickup truck around Fairbanks, Alaska, for about a week. It was a good time, I'd say. I liked it.
That's the heck. Don't tell U-Haul about this. I don't
What?
know. I don't think we did anything wrong.
I don't think U-Haul
we just
advertises
used-
itself as a rental car service for
No,
vacations.
but we rented the truck and then we just used it as you would a truck. We didn't even haul anything, so really it was better for them because we didn't even put any wear and tear on it.
Exactly. That's what I was saying. But what we really wanted to do in Alaska was find a moose. I bought a moose call. We were all set to find ourselves a moose.
Forgot
Now,
about the moose call.
We didn't know what step 2 would be when we actually found the moose, because I've heard they can be quite dangerous. We never did end up finding a moose.
You
It was
don't
not
really want to find a moose, actually.
No, it turns out when you're in Alaska at the time of the year, land of the midnight sun, when it's sunlight all day, not a lot of moose around. I don't know why that is. Didn't see any moose. Really
And
disappointed
our
about that.
Airbnb was in it was kind of Alaska's a rural place, but it was like there were other like houses and cabins around. It was like this dirt road that was kind of a neighborhood, but like mostly out in the woods, like any cabin that you go to. So when Jake was trying to use his moose call, and I'm like, I don't think people are going to appreciate you trying to call moose into their yards. I don't think
Alaska. They're not gonna care. They know
the
moose.
neighbors are going to like. I don't think the neighbors are going to like a big bull moose
The only
showing up in
neighbor
their
we
backyard.
had was a guy like 3 blocks down the road who had a dog sled team that you could hear howling at all hours of the night or day, however you define that in Alaska.
It was those were the neighbors, and the other neighbors were the mosquitoes.
Oh yeah, man, big old suckers up there in Alaska. The mosquitoes are you don't bring a fly swatter to handle the mosquitoes. You bring a howitzer machine gun.
So we made
Howitzer
we made
machine
a
gun. That's not a thing. What am I talking
we
about?
made several episodes of Yesterday Today specifically dedicated to like certain areas or certain states. And we wanted to do an Alaska one, but we couldn't come up with like a way to do that in storyline of like the actual like storyline of the show. So I think it was like very, very forced of like, oh, it's winter time. Let's do or maybe it was summer. I think it was summer, and like let's do a cold episode about Alaska or something.
it was winter. I remember
Oh,
that.
okay. So we were
Yeah.
trying to play into
You-
like,
you
oh, it's winter.
forced that
Where
in
is winter?
somehow. I don't remember.
It's Alaska. That's how I shoehorned that in.
well, I remember. Obviously, I wasn't on the trip, but I remember as a YT listener, the fact that when the road trip was over, Jake is dragging the moose head into out of the car and into the radio,
Studio, yeah.
and then probably Sydney shows up, with like the door slamming effect, and life just begins again.
Yeah, well, that's
Yeah.
how they do it on old radio shows. It's like, we're done with that, now we're back to normal.
Yeah,
I had a much more elaborate way to end that road trip storyline that I was like deep in my creative pocket, like going into all this like deep stuff about alternate endings and all this. And Jake was like, "How about we just go home?" And I'm like, "Okay,
It's not
I
that
guess."
hard, man. It's not that hard.
yeah.
Full
You were thinking
disclosure, we did that entire road trip storyline arc, and we were not actually on a road trip at the time. We were
Shocking,
just
I know.
recording it normally. I know.
We
I know.
we didn't actually end up in a jail in Georgia. We were,
I hate to ruin the illusion for everyone, but
Okay.
yeah.
Well, hey, we can edit that out later just to maintain trade secrets. But it's so funny traveling too. I'll admit one of my funniest moments when we got down to Oklahoma on this trip. I looked out on this field and there was like all this white stuff like on the crops, and I was like, "What is that?" And then it dawned on me, that's a cotton field. And so it's like, yep, I'm a Yankee. I have no idea what a field of cotton looks like. That's
This
my,
boy ain't from around here, is he? Hey.
you just
You
blowing
northerners.
Our other
Beauregard, get the shotgun. We got a northerner on our property.
yeah.
The only cotton I've ever seen is on the shelf at Old Navy. I've
The
never seen
only
it in the
letter I ever
wild.
pulled was in the subway in New York.
The funny thing is that I think it was like May, and we went down to Lake Conroe, and there was like a swimming pool, and there were all of these people like hanging around like the swimming pool, but nobody was going in. And so my wife and I, we like jumped into the pool and we were like swimming around, and everybody's just like looking at us like, what are you doing? Don't you know that water is freezing cold? And to us, we're just like, hey, this feels good, because we're just used to being cold up here, I guess. So
We went to a lake in Alaska because one of my big things, Jake's thing about Alaska was finding a moose. My thing about Alaska was going fishing in Alaska.
oh,
And
cool.
you can actually do
Similar
that.
results.
You can go on like you can go on like charter fishing in Alaska. There's great stuff in like the ocean and stuff. Deadliest
Now,
catch,
we-
that type of thing.
We didn't do
I
that.
didn't do any of that.
We rented a canoe from the most ramshackle, dingy little like hut. We just rented a canoe and paddled
I don't
around.
even think that was part of the fishing arc. We went to like, so I just had like my telescopic fishing pole, and we went to like a lake, a recreational lake, and the part of the lake that I tried fishing at, I say tried because I didn't end up catching anything. I think I had a fish on at one point, but it did not make it to shore. But they had signs up posted everywhere. Do not swim in this lake. You'll get like flesh-eating bacteria or something like that.
That
And so maybe it's a good thing we didn't catch a fish out of that lake. I don't know.
I remember being down in Mexico with it was like a church missions trip thing, and we had a free day, and I went out with a bunch of people, and it was nighttime, and we found. Don't remember whose idea this was, but it was like a tourism thing where you were supposed to get on this speedboat captained by a very, very shady guy. You can't trust anybody down there. That I'm just saying. You get on the speedboat, you go out in the middle of the water, in the middle of the night on this like lake thing, and the first half you're going through waters where the point is, we're looking for gators. This is like a gator sighting expedition down here in Puerto Escondido, Mexico. You got a lot of gators around. And then you get to the second half, further on in the lake, and there's these, the idea is you can get out and swim, and there's all these, I forget what they're called, but they're like bugs that glow in the water or something like that. I'm like,
and
so
do they
wait a
have
minute.
like?
So, and I'm like, okay, I understand the appeal of wanting to swim around with the glow-in-the-dark bugs, but weren't you just telling me that, like, 5 miles that way, there's a bunch of gators? These
Do you have
two
an
things
agreement?
probably shouldn't be mixing.
Do you have an agreement with the gators to not go beyond a certain point? Or?
No, you have an agreement with the tour company to not sue them if you get eaten by a gator, I guess.
Buried in the fine print. And the youth pastor, is hoping the parents aren't reading that too closely. But
Yeah.
hey,
It's funny what you will consider acceptable when you're in a, like, more third world type of country as opposed to in America. It's like, in America, it's like, no, we got to follow all the laws. Everything's got to be safe. You're down in Mexico. Yeah, I'll go swim with some gators. That's fine.
yeah,
It's different laws. That's fine. Now it's
That's
okay.
In America, you can yell at the staff if like the towels aren't fluffy enough. But if there's gators in the water, that's just how it is down there.
There's a scorpion in your hotel room. It's like, oh yeah, it's just Mexico. I have
That's local flair.
No complaints. That's just how it is.
the gators let you know that, hey, there's no flesh-eating bacteria. Otherwise, the gators wouldn't be swimming around. So,
Zombie
Yeah.
gators, exactly.
I'll tell you what.
Well, I got to ask you here, what's it like working with your brothers? You guys obviously,
Oh, I hate it. These guys are awful. I have been
Well,
trying to get out of this contract for years.
I'd say working might be a stretch because a lot of the stuff, most of the stuff we do is not necessarily career oriented. It's more like hobby stuff on the side. And obviously,
yeah, and our
some of the
brothers are the
listeners-
only ones. Our brothers are the only ones who will put up with shoving a microphone in their face and saying, "Read these lines."
yeah. So that's the key. If you want to get creative with stuff, you got to have a few brothers that you can force to do unpaid labor.
Yeah,
for your
basically.
little podcast hobby.
I
You
have-
might be some of the listeners here that are familiar with YT might be asking, "Hey, speaking of Yesterday Today, where is the new? Where I haven't heard out of Yesterday Today in some time, and in quite a few weeks. We've been missing a few episodes. I think last summer, sometime around there, is our last episode of Yesterday Today. Honestly, it's just a matter of schedules. Has been the issue.
Well, I thought the whole issue, because I never got a full explanation of why we weren't doing it anymore, because this whole thing, McLean sort of handles the radio end of things, and he worked at KISU, so he had the end to get the show on the air, so I'm not even sure what happened there. We haven't ever...
Just to clarify, KISU is Idaho State's public radio station, and they're unique because most of the radio stations, a lot of college radio stations at this point are kind of like owned by bigger companies and they air like public radio content, but they don't necessarily have students producing content. And KISU kind of toes the line between those two. So it has a lot of NPR, like national programming, but at least when I was there, they also had students come in, they worked there. You actually had opportunities for students to kind of gain skills, whereas like I'm not super familiar with Boise State's like radio station, but for instance, they're more of a corporate commercial type of, not commercial in terms of programming, but they have more like professionals working there as opposed to students. KISU has a lot of opportunities, and I kind of weaseled my way in here and there, but they had a lot of opportunities. Great people at KISU. Don't send them any hate. But I was able to work there part-time as a student when I was in college, and then I graduated, and then me and my fiance moved down to the Salt Lake area, and it's just something, I don't work there anymore. And so they were more than happy to put on Yesterday Today. It was airing in Pocatello, and then they had it on their website and stuff. I do remember the general manager there, great guy, but he was getting like emails from people. He was like, "Yeah, I got an email from like this guy in Arizona asking where Yesterday Today is." I'm like, sorry about that. So I think they started sending those to my email. They started sending them my way. But yeah, the thing with that is since I started working full time, this is my first full time job out of college. And so I'm like, don't necessarily have the time to fully invest into like Yesterday Today. Mine and Jake's schedules don't often match up. And so it was difficult for us to keep doing it. And so it was hard to justify it still being like a part of KISU.
Sure.
So I believe it's no longer on the KISU website. We do plan at some point to start doing Yesterday Today again. We're working on.
We haven't fleshed out a plan per se. McLean's speaking off the top of his head here.
I guess I should say we intend to. We don't necessarily plan to.
Well, this is good news. All YT fans are
McLean, you gave him false hope.
The YTers, the fan base is very active. Well, they're demanding new content.
September 5th, 2024, I believe, is the last air date, and as we have left you, you are currently in a town in Illinois where Jack Benny...
Waukegan, yeah.
Waukegan, Illinois.
And so that's where you guys are. I guess it just depends on how much you like Waukegan. Yeah.
Settle down.
If the show ever comes back, we'll come up with some dumb like storyline thing for what happened. I don't know.
Oh, I've already written that. So once we get that off. The interesting thing, so you were asking about working with brothers. And so that's really fun because we can always have like our brothers come in and do a voice or something like that. Our brother Gage, again, not to unveil the mystery here, but our brother Gage does the voice of the producer.
The producer.
And
you see, we all like to do this voice as a bit of a funny little inside joke bit. But when Gage
I don't remember how this voice started, but Gage has got it down.
Gage, he sounds the most like a bitter old man who's been divorced several times. So he's the guy. Yeah, he's the guy.
A lot of the inspiration for that kind of comes from a lot of like inside jokes or like bits that we'll just do with each other. When Yesterday Today first started, when we were doing it, we would actually just hop on a Zoom call and like do it ad lib. And so I think for like the first year or so of like modern Yesterday Today, because it's gone through a few different iterations, but the first like year or so, we just would hop on a Zoom call, ad lib it, and then splice it together. And then at some point, our schedules stopped matching up.
McLean would bother this guy we used to know, and I say used to because I think the reason we haven't had contact with this man for several years now is because McLean kept pestering him to record stuff. McLean just, hit him up too many times for a recording invite.
I think he preferred to be a bit more off grid, and so I think we kind of lost connection with him at some point. But yeah, so we have another friend that was from Louisiana. So in our Louisiana Gator episode, he actually played the Coudron Boudreaux.
Yes,
he played that character, so we just had him voice it. But at some point, about a year or so into doing the KISU show, our schedule stopped matching up, and so I think I would just like write out a script and we'd record our lines separately, and so Jake would end up like editing all that together and making it somewhat cohesive, and so it would actually be listenable. But at some point it stopped being like an ad lib that we just did together, which I imagine was a nightmare to edit, and then became a bit more structured in terms of like writing.
Personally speaking, I think the ad lib makes it a little more lively and fun to listen to, I think. I don't know if I'd say the scripting's necessarily easier. Well, I don't know. It is a nightmare to edit no matter what you do because you got to do a lot of sound design and stuff, so,
Yeah, so when we actually started writing shows, I think that's when we had a bit more storylines come in too, because it was a little bit easier to keep track of things like that. And again, I don't know from like a listener perspective if like it was more chaotic trying to listen to like an ad lib show as opposed to like a scripted one, because like you said, Jake, it's more like lively and fun to listen to. I don't know if that's just on our end.
Had a lot.
They had more character.
Kipman would interject with like just the funniest one-liner bit. That
the ad lib has a certain magic to it.
It does.
The ad lib has a certain magic to it because you would get like one-liners, you'd get jokes, sometimes whole plot lines that would just come up on the spot. The writing is fine, I guess, but it's not. It doesn't have that same sort of quality to it because the ad lib, like, you would just get someone delivers a line that makes everyone just like bust out laughing, and we'd have to like re-record an ad lib because everyone was like laughing over it.
Well, one of the things that I think is so great about your show, and why I think it has so much to do with the purpose of this show is to encourage people. Is I really think that's what your show does for people. It's just so wholesome and lighthearted, and yet you kind of had an interesting platform to just kind of bring up little things like make people think about things. But it was really fun, and I loved your some of your characters are just I think correct me if I'm wrong, but Jake, you play Sydney, and McLean, you play Linny the Rat. Am I talking?
That's only scratching the surface of the characters.
Whoa!
I've got
Sidney Snorthoff. We have to pay for Sidney Snorthoff. That's a whole other actor.
That man wants so much money. No, I got.
That's what's really holding up Yesterday Today production is the Snorthoff contract.
Yeah, I do Sidney Mondo. I do Frankie Spork. Who else do I do?
Jake does most of the characters. Linny the Rat is about the only voice that I could like figure out how to do to make it sound different enough from my voice.
Jake, you do Frankie Spork, really?
Yeah,
I would never.
With Frankie Spork, I couldn't get the voice to sound different enough from mine to make him seem distinct, so I did a little voice changing and post-editing. So that's... Yeah, Frankie Spork, private eye, I'll be in my office. You gotta just layer that with a little distortion on top of it, and then you get the actual Frankie Spork voice. I wish I had that voice. I wish that was my voice. That's a good voice.
That's terrific. One of my favorite episodes of Frankie Spork is when he's trying to nail the local weatherman. For getting all the forecasts right, and
that was another instance of me wondering like how coherent is this to a listener? Because I just wrote the script and I was like, does this make any sense at all? Can you even follow this? So I'm glad to hear that you were at least able to tell what was going on.
That's great. So obviously you guys have fun, and it's kind of interesting, McLean, because it's like kind of not everybody who's working a day or night job, as it were, depending on what time, but a day job essentially has a loyal following of listeners that they are trying to satisfy on the side. So that's kind of neat. You kind of have a unique situation there.